Ladies and gentlemen, whether you follow chess closely or just occasionally when it pops up on your social media feed, you should be aware of the fact that sometimes when Magnus Carlsen does something, you're going to see it. A year ago, it was when he slammed a table in Norway against the reigning world champion Gukesh. That probably got several hundreds of millions of views worldwide. This time, in Germany in 2026, it was a game that he played against Alua Nurman from Kazakhstan. And basically, this is what happened. The two of them sat down for a game and Alua offered him a selfie on her phone. Magnus obliged, they took the picture, but then he got up and came back with the arbiter, or the referee, who requested the phone from the possession of Alua, and we can only assume returned it to her after the game. Now, you would think this is just a quick thing that happens, 10-15 seconds, and that's it. But it made massive international news. As I am talking, I hope the editor is putting stuff on the screen. It was covered all across the globe. It was even covered by World Star. Yes, that thing that I grew up, with watching street fights on. You would yell World Star and then people would start recording. This is the era that we now live in. Absolutely fascinating viral moment. Now I'm going to break it down for you, and then I'm going to show you some of the games, including that one from that tournament. It has been 35 days since I have covered Magnus Carlsen on this channel, maybe 36 or 37. I think that must be a record, right? I hope you're proud of me, because I'm proud of me. Anyway, you are not allowed to have an electronic device on your person, and that is the FIDE rule. And in this particular instance, it reminds us of last year when Magnus actually requested that his opponent remove the watch. Nowadays, we live in a time where a watch, a phone in a bag nearby, all of these things could be used hypothetically as cheating devices. This was not an explicit accusation of Alua by any means. No, in many ways, it was just trying to follow the rules and also potentially to keep her out of hot water, I think, because can you imagine if you defeat Magnus Carlsen and you happen to have a phone on you, right? That would actually be really bad. I don't think she minded. And you might also remember that last year, Etienne Bacrot, a super grandmaster, very accomplished grandmaster, also wanted a selfie with Magnus. People usually don't get to play Magnus Carlsen in a tournament because he doesn't play in open tournaments. Unlike tennis, which is a knockout system in every tournament, chess is generally closed circuit. So the top players are sort of closed off from the rest. And that's why this happened. That's why the two of them played. And I know Alua. Alua played for the Gotham Knights several years ago in the Pro Chess League, and she helped us win a championship. So she's a very good player. Happy to see her turn into one of the strongest chess players in Kazakhstan. And yeah, Magnus Carlsen gets a phone confiscated and goes viral internationally once again. On that note, let's check out some of the games, and let's check out this game in particular. Now, one thing you are probably going to be confused about is why the starting setup is different every single game. This tournament that is held in Grenke, it's a massive festival every year. I hope to play one day. Recently added this edition of the freestyle format, or, Chess 960 Fischer Random, where the back row of pieces is shuffled. And since the back row of pieces is shuffled, it is randomly selected at the beginning of every round. There are 960 possible combinations, I think technically like 958. And this is the position that they got. So everything is different. White can castle this way or try to castle the long way. It depends on how your starting setup is. And yeah, lo and behold, this is the position for Alua versus Magnus, the famous cell phone game. C4, G6. And both players develop very quickly this bishop. They're not physically moving it, but they are activating on the diagonal. Both players do this, and Magnus offers to trade off Alua's bishop, Alua's long-range bishop, because his bishop is going to be in the center. Now, if I'm playing Magnus here, I'm probably going bishop c3. Here she plays the move e4, which is actually already a massive commitment, believe it or not. Maybe you're watching this as a beginner or an intermediate player, and you're like, wait a minute, how's this such a big deal? If you put 3 pawns in the center of the board on light squares, whenever you put pawns on a certain color, they control that color. Control meaning they will take on that color. They protect that color, but they don't protect the opposite one. And maybe Magnus will be able to exploit this in the future. So now he actually moves the bishop back. He moves the bishop back, and his idea is now to take control of this weakened square with the move c5. I gotta tell you folks, bishop c6, bishop d7, if Magnus does this against me, I'm pooping my pants. And then I'm probably making a move on the chessboard. Because I'm just like, oh my God, like he did to me what, like, this is like the equivalent of feinting a punch, you know, and getting a reaction out of you. Now she tries to trade pieces with Magnus, and he obliges. He actually doesn't care. He has now prioritized the control of the d4 square, and then he's going to build beyond that. She takes, and then she plays queen h6 check. Now, this is totally fascinating because the king has to move, and the rook moved. So black cannot castle. His king and rook are going to be stranded just like that. But I think Magnus has calculated that this is safe. There is no threat from white. The dark squared bishop is gone. And even if white could get a knight there, there is no threat. So Magnus voluntarily went for this peculiar position because he understands that he is going to establish dominant control of this square and probably go on to cause white some problems. She's obviously threatening to take on e7, so he's not able to do that right away, but that is the idea. And now Magnus offers his opponent a queenless middle game. And in this position, the advantage is minus 0.2, which is basically equal, very close to equal. If you traded queens here, the advantage triples, nearly quadruples in some variations, to minus 0.6, 0.7. And the point is that white needs the queen on the board to offset the potential positional weakness. White is offsetting the fact that black will control this very nicely with a potential attack against this king. Because remember, white's king can still castle this direction, and you can launch an attack. And black's king is going to be stuck on g8. Black's king will be living there for the future. So knight e to d4. Magnus controls the square, and she castles short side. She could have castled long side. My voice is a little bit like this because I'm recovering from a month of coughing of the flu. She could have done this, but obviously then black would generate some sort of attack. So she ended up castling short side. Magnus played h5 here. h5 does two things. Number one, it prevents white from maybe getting an attack. Number two, you could trade the queen still. So you gain more control of the h6 square with that move. Alua played h4, and now we have a pretty symmetrical position. So she's keeping even with Magnus, not letting him overtake here. Bishop h3. She trades this bishop. He goes e6. e6 is a nice little move. The point of e6 is that if you take the bishop, you get forked, so you can't do that. You have to move the knight. The knight comes back to e3, and now Magnus is going to try to outplay his opponent from this position. But she's keeping even with him. I think Alua is like 17 or 18. She's 2,400 FIDE rating. I think she's the number 2, maybe number 3 woman in all of Kazakhstan. And likely a top 10, top 15 player overall there. I don't, maybe their top list is totally different than the one I remember. But she's keeping even with Magnus. I mean, this is really impressive. So a6, she goes f4. She's looking to start an attack. He goes b5. She goes b3, stabilizing the position. Apparently not the best move, but very natural move to me. He goes b4. She goes knight a4. Now, it would have been a little bit more prudent, apparently, to back this knight up to e2, and then try to trade that knight, and then maybe try to trade it with both knights. Drop both knights back and try to, to trade off black's activity. Knight a4, Magnus plays a5. So he's just simply improving his position, not overcommitting. The knight on a4 is certainly misplaced. I think it definitely should have gone back this way. She now prepares the kingside attack. He is ready for it with rook d8. She plays king h1. And, I mean, it's not really clear how Magnus is going to try to play this position for a win. But he goes king h7. And now it's quite clear his second rook is going to come to the party. But still, both sides have all 8 of their pawns. And since both sides have all 8 of their pawns, that means that the pawn structure is very closed, very locked. It's difficult to win a position when something is so deadlocked. So rook h2, knight back to e7, queen g2. Alua is still potentially floating this idea of breaking open the side of the board and letting her queen and 2 rooks loose against Magnus's king. Still, this knight is really the problem. When she went knight a4, she obviously had an idea, but she might have underestimated how long it would take to get that knight back into the game. So the knight goes back to g8. Here comes g4. I mean, all of that Magnus doing, putting the king here, playing the knight all the way back to g8. Magnus is waving the red flag in front of the bull. He is trying to get his opponent to take more risk in the position, because to take more risk opens you up to a counterattack. He takes. She just goes guns blazing straight at him. Both kings are on the same file, H file, but black's king is sort of blocked in. How are you going to defend this position? Magnus doesn't defend it the best way. He doesn't play knight to f6, which apparently was the way to go. So the computer wants knight f6, pawn takes, and king to g6, which is just incredible. And the idea is then to take the rook, and then the king, shockingly enough, is completely safe in all these lines. But he goes f5, which is not the best, not because of knight takes g4, but because there's hg6, king g6, and then knight g4. And this is a problem because after pawn takes, in this position, you have takes, and rook g1, and you actually just straight up lose the game because you lose this rook. So Alua should take on g6 and then go here. She does this straight away. It could transpose, but now Magnus has the timely move knight e7, and after pawn takes, he's going to run his king to g8. And that is why in this position, Alua needed to take here first. She does this, plays h6, but now the white attack is completely stopped. And Magnus waved on his younger opponent. She couldn't make anything happen. Now the knight has to back up, and now he's going to start taking over the game. Queen f6 is played. The computer wanted rook g8. She goes queen g3, knight c6, rook g8. White, by the way, look at this knight. I mean, it has to take the walk of shame back into the position. And now that Magnus takes over the game, he baited his opponent to come forward. He froze the attack. At some point, one of these 4 pawn moves will probably seal the game. You're probably going to open the position, and that's going to be that. And there it is, g5, queen g5, the counterattack. And it's not even an attack against the king. It's simply a transposition to a transformation to an endgame where you are winning. Knight e5 is coming, and this knight has been the problem for white all along. She put it on a4. It never re-entered the game. Magnus Carlsen, very well known for playing against the worst piece. And right here, he plays against the worst piece. White resigns. She just resigns the game. Why does she resign the game? She's only down a pawn. Well, black is going to bring his king, bring his pawn. And the real problem here is the fact that the knight is coming in, and you just can't stop it. It's going to eat all the queenside pawns. When Magnus expanded with b4 and a5, this is the 50th move. He played b4 and a5 on the 18th move. He knew that 30 moves into the future, this knight could potentially be useful in an endgame. And he knew that after he played b4, a5, these pawns could be problematic. Yeah. Best player in the world. And he will make you put your phone away if you have one. I was very impressed with a couple of other games from this tournament. We all love Magnus games. We don't love necessarily that the board is shuffled every game. I think that confuses us, but this is one of the many formats in the world of chess right now. This is a very interesting format because this is the exact same starting position. The only difference is the rook and knight are swapped. So that's really interesting. What this means is the Scandinavian defense is really good. What do I mean by that? Well, if black plays e5 and white does this, there is no knight c6. Normally in the Scandinavian defense, you are attacked by a knight, right? So e4, d5, this would be a mistake for Magnus because he can't play knight to c3. In fact, he could lose the game instantly because his rook would be trapped. And that's kind of what this freestyle is all about. Which is why in this position, he didn't take the pawn on d5, and instead he advanced it forward to e5. So, right? There you go. Like this. Boom. e5. And now you have the same position, except black is going to maybe struggle to get his knight into the game in a typical, there's no c5 and knight to c6. Like you would in a Caro Kann. And I'm just really impressed by how Magnus played this game. c5. And then he built up this position. And the position looks like a French defense. I mean, it looks like you played e4, e6, d4, d5, e5. Problem is, black does not get his knight ever to a square that makes any sense. The knight on c6 pressures the middle, and when the knight is not there, it's just absolutely terrible. It's not going to be participating in the game, and because of that, it's not really a factor, and white's knight is a factor. It could go over here. There's a lot of positions in the French defense where white takes a space advantage and then launches an attack and actually just goes on to win the game. So, yeah, we're about to see that in full effect. b6. Magnus plays h4, typical idea, h5. Now black's kingside is on watch. You are always threatening to attack over there. If the knight moves, the bishop moves, and short castles happens. Knight to c7, knight e3, bishop to b5. Okay, so we have a trade of bishops here being offered from Shamsiddin, which makes perfect sense because that could be a bad bishop. Doesn't really matter. Magnus plays castles, queen d7, and now we'll prepare an attack. And how do you attack a person in a position that looks like this? Well, very simple. You bring another pawn. f4, g4, and f5. And black is kind of defenseless. The pawn structure is not helping. You are not going to ever get this to a situation where you're going to create some sort of counterplay. The knight on b5 doesn't scare anybody. And, well, knight c2, Magnus stabilizes. And this is already dire straits for black. Because he could castle in either direction, and they're both bad. If he castles this way, you will just launch an attack on that side of the board because the person that controls the space and the pawn breaks controls the game. If you castle this way, you'll probably lose in about 5 moves. So Shamsidian tries to break out with his bishop and not castle at all. Magnus is still arriving because either you're taking and letting in my pieces, or you're going here, and after the trade, you're letting in my pawn. Pawn takes f6. Now, you don't take with the pawn here if you're playing with white. You go knight to g4. Very important. You're going to trade the bishop and threaten knight f6. So you are threatening to win the game on the spot, which is to trade the bishops and fork. Now black has to castle. The good news is you weren't just threatening a fork. You're just purely threatening an infiltration. You don't take with the pawn. Of course, you take with the rook. This is weak. This is weak. These knights are just not participating. They're not participating in the game at all. That knight from a8, went to c7, and that was it. And now white has landed here. Shamsidian plays rook g8. Magnus wins a pawn. And as always, we'll send this to a comfortable endgame. Queen f3. Now black gets a little bit of counterplay. He's threatening this. But rook f1 is just a very calm move. If knight takes d4 on the board, well, it's very simple. Right? Like the queen is hit. You just take it. Queen takes his check. You can block. You can play king h1, I guess. So you could play rook f2. And then if this, queen f7 is completely fatal. Black's position is totally falling apart. Rook h8, bishop f4. Rook c2, it's just mate. And, you got to calculate a little bit here, but after rook f1, there's no more check, and queen c7 is game over. So Magnus goes for this. Black plays rook h8. We still take on f7. Because of this, you have queen f8 check, and you would be winning the rook back. And I just found this to be very methodical. Nice defending of your own king. And now we win the game by walking our king to safety. It gets a little dicey here, but this is still winning. Look at this. This is high-level stuff. I don't know if Magnus luckily stumbles into these things sometimes, just purely based on experience, but the 2 pawns with the king will beat the rook. The knight cannot defend, and what's more about this position, I'm actually willing to bet there are lines you can sack the rook completely. You don't have to, but the king walks to g5, and now you will promote these pawns. Rook g8, king h4, the knight is active, but cannot come closer. It's active, but it is absolutely useless. And white will win by playing g5, king h5, g6, h7, g7, and simply winning the game. And, yeah, he played king d5 and he resigned because you might get this. Now I can sacrifice. Don't go g7 and blunder this, but go king g5 and then g7, and then you win the game. And I think even king h6 and g7 is more accurate because they'll have to lose the rook completely. I was very impressed with this game. And I found this opening very funny because the swap of the rook and the knight in the corner, right, was really interesting to me. I was like, oh, well, there you go. I mean, that's how you play this position. And I like this game as well. I'll show you one more game. I mean, one more Magnus game never hurt. He didn't win this tournament, believe it or not. He actually didn't win a tournament that he played in. And he's not playing too much nowadays. Everything is swapped here. The only pieces that are on their home squares are these 3. And that doesn't even mean much because the knight is there. I mean, everything is different. You probably want to get your C and D pawns going. You want to activate like on the diagonal, but if you play b3, you block your knight's development. So we're going to see what happens, right? So the boys Magnus chooses to develop his knights, and Maxime Lagarde from France doesn't develop his knights at all. He plays c6, b5, setting up kind of like a Philidor, Black Lion type of thing. a3 here, knight b6 developing. And now Magnus does one thing that is very, very common in this format, which is developing your queen quickly. So he tries to play queen to d3 with the intention of moving the queen over here, and that's what he does. So he gets his queen out because now the queen is going to target this, and the queen is going to target this side of the board, right? H-file. Maybe the bishop is going to come here. Maybe the king is going to castle that way. I don't know. This bishop is ready to come alive. Lagarde plays h5, declaring hostilities against Magnus, and Magnus plays h4. It's still not clear where they're going to commit their kings. So with white, you would castle this way if you move the bishop, or you could castle this way by simply hopping with the rook. You cannot castle, the rook is committed to one side of the board. Lagarde now goes back with his bishop, which is a little bit of a weird move. And now he plays knight c4, and Magnus trades off the bishop for the knight because he thinks, even though black is getting the bishop pair, which is traditional chess wisdom to be good, it's not that good because the light-scored bishop is just going to be bad, and this knight is going to be targeting this pawn, and I think Magnus is right. I think that bishop is going to have a miserable time defending that pawn on c4. Now Magnus makes this trade, and black is stuck with a ruined pawn structure on the queen side. That's not going to be moving anytime soon. Now we play knight back to f1, and the knight goes back to f1 for a very simple purpose. You would like to reroute it. So you are probably going to put the knight on e3. You're going to move this bishop there or there. Knight goes to e3 or to f3, but if you wanted to go to f3, you would have gone via d2. So in all likelihood, that's the move. He takes this pawn. Black sacrifices a pawn to activate his knight, get his bishops out, but this is our position. For now, Lagarde is still in the game because his bishops are good. The faster that they come alive, the better his position is going to be. White is going to have some difficulties castling. Lagarde is also ready to activate his rook at a moment's notice and launch an attack against the king. But then after g6, a lot of that goes out the window. He was worried about the knight going to f5, and he wants to play king h7 and bring the rooks around like that, which is what he's going to do. And actually, he's kind of right. The position is hovering around equality, although it's not easy. White is up a pawn. Not an easy position at all. He plays rook d8 to kind of combat Magnus. Rook d4. Knight drops back to a2 to try to play c3 and maybe knight b4, activating like this. And Lagarde plays c3, sacrificing a second pawn to activate his bishop. Now his bishops mean business. Magnus takes with the pawn, attacking the rook in the middle so that he is not losing a rook in the corner. Lagarde plays rook a4, and this is anybody's game still. Rook takes a3, knight to b4. Very, very problematic position. But now Magnus plays a very, very nice idea. Looks like this position is going to go on, but knight to d5 arrives. And knight to d5 is a very difficult move to meet. It's going to mess with your equilibrium a little bit. You get hit with knight to d5, you fork the queen and the bishop, and you're just giving up a knight completely. So pawn takes, knight takes. Now the black queen needs to defend against f7, and he needs to defend on b6. Really, the only move in this position is queen a7. Why queen a7? Because white is now forced to take on b6. Knight b6, queen f7. The king goes here, and this position is apparently fine for black. You are up a bishop, and it looks really dangerous. And maybe Magnus was relying on some queen e7 with a rook d6 infiltration. He probably saw that the rook is hanging, but rook a7 is always there in time. And this is dangerous, but still a game. It's still a game. The reason why queen e6 is bad is you don't actually have to take the bishop. White can throw in the move rook to b1. Rook to b1 was less possible like this because there would be rook to b8, and if rook b5, there would be bishop takes f2 check. And then you would win the rook on b5. And the queen would be protecting f7 at all times. So that is the major difference. What happens in the game is after rook b1, there is no rook b8, because if you play rook b8 now, I take, and this is actually what happens in the game, bishop f2, queen f2, and black resigned because rook b5, there would be a fork. So he put his queen on the wrong square. When Magnus sacrificed his knight against him, he probably felt the pressure, and his queen needed to commit to a square where it was free of a lot of different dangers. e6, a7, even b7. b7 looks ridiculous, but rook b1 and rook b8 now wouldn't work because the queen is in the way. But now, after rook b1, you could actually move the bishop, and this would be protected. And it doesn't look like it's going to be protected for a while, but your queen is hanging. So you have to be a bit careful. Magnus went on to win this game with queen f2, knight c7. His opponent resigned because not only is it this problem, there's also the problem with the king. But Magnus Carlsen actually did not win the tournament. He finished with 7, and as you see on your screen, it was won by Vincent Keimer and Maxime Vacher-Lagrave. And unfortunately, even though Hans Niemann was playing in the tournament and had 5 out of 5 at some point, and Magnus had 4.5, the two of them never met. They never actually ended up playing each other. So that would have been good cinema, but sadly that did not happen. But this is the story of how Magnus Carlsen managed to generate another 9-figure viral moment. Not 9-figure like dollar signs, but views. went viral absolutely everywhere. Couldn't believe how many major publications were talking about this. And even though it wasn't like such a huge, it wasn't such, anyway, that's life. And, you know, we farm Magnus on this channel plenty, but not over the last month. So you got to give me some props. We've been milking other things like the candidates, Jinxie, and so on and so forth. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll get back to more regularly scheduled Magnus content very soon. Get out of here.